Welcome to Horror Score. We're your hosts, Jesse and
Vanessa.
And this week's episode of Horror Score is the 1986 classic
Invaders from Mars.
Yeah.
The remake.
I didn't even know that there was a remake. Well, I knew that this movie existed, but I didn't know that this movie was a remake. I just found that out recently, and I don't think I've seen the original. Have you?
No.
This was a first watch for Vanessa.
Yes.
This could be my 8th, 9th, or 10th watch, but I haven't seen it in over a decade, so I was able to view this movie with a fresh pair of eyes.
So this episode and the next episode are movies from our childhood that influenced our interest in the horror genre, and this was yours.
Right. Yeah, I loved this one as a kid. That's probably where I did most of the viewings of it, probably before I was 12 years old. It was just on TV all the time. But great flick. And we're going to get into it in a few moments. But first, what do you want to do before we get started?
Well, I have a question. What is your favorite horror subgenre?
Subgenre. Monsters. Big or small. Scary monsters. Funny monsters. They don't have to have an agenda, but I do like creature features, monster movies. The Thing is my favorite horror movie. I know it's an alien also, but it's an alien monster. And just any horror movie with
just saying, a couple of these movies that are your favorites are in the science fiction genre.
Well, monsters have to come from somewhere. So they're either from space, they're from another dimension, or scientists made them. It's spiritual.
Monsters are born.
Or magic. And then some people become monsters, and like serial killers and whatnot. But, it's if you're a writer and you're like, where does this monster need to come from? Space is a very easy place to just say that's where this monster is from. What about yours? What's your favorite subgenre, since you're going to ask me?
Well, I would say mine is more man-made. Mine's very, psychological horror. So, like you've probably heard in many episodes, I think the greatest horror movie of all time is Silence of the Lambs. And if you want to debate in the comments whether or not it's actually a horror film, you can. But only one side will be right, and that is the side that says that it is.
Horror is a big genre. There's room.
That's why there's
for
all
Silence
these
of the
offshoots and subgenres.
It's like ale. All beers are ale, but then not all stouts are, porters, and then not all IPAs are necessarily imperials, right?
Sure.
Okay. So this movie, when it started, the opening theme song, Right Away, I had pegged as being the composer who did Total Recall. I was wrong. I looked it up. It's Christopher Young, and he did a bunch of other movies that I really liked. Hellraiser, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, just to name a few. And so I think it starts great. This movie, though, we own it in Horror Score. We always have legal copies or rights to whatever we're viewing. We don't pirate anything.
It's just respectful.
Yeah. We got this copy here. It's a 2-pack with another movie, which from my childhood also, that I haven't seen in at least 20 years, and I hope to get to it. But this one is Invaders from Mars. Unfortunately, the movie poster for it, I hate. But the real movie poster, there was 2 other versions. They're awesome. One of them is a nice, just simple shot of Copper Hill with the space and a cool logo. And the other one reminds me a lot of the movie poster for The Thing. It's blue, and it's awesome.
You hated the title screen.
I did.
This title screen is garbage.
The title screen, when you put this DVD in, and this cover, they're the same thing. It spoils everything. This is the big bad guy. Here's another alien. It just spoilers right there.
I wasn't paying that close attention, so it wasn't a surprise. It didn't ruin anything.
We'll talk about those guys more when we get to the villain category. Anything else you want to get out of the way before we start scoring this gem?
No.
From my childhood. All right. Let's get into the story. If you want to take us in to Tobe Hooper's Invaders from Mars.
Tobe Hooper. Story-wise, it doesn't lack a story. They have at least 8. They've got at least 8 storylines going at once. It's a bit distracting, trying to follow a thread, and first it's just this boy, and then it's him and the nurse, and then the military gets involved. It's a whole town conspiracy, basically, and I could never nail down just one plot line and follow it through to the end. I feel like an hour into the movie, we were still adding plot hooks.
What did you give it?
I gave it an 8.
Oh, okay.
Because it wasn't like a bad story. It was just distracting.
I was a little bit more generous. I put nostalgia aside and I gave it a 10. It's a tale we've seen a bunch of times before where there's a boy who knows what's really going on and nobody else believes him.
But I love that. That's part of the psychological thriller thing that I love.
It's a classic formula that works, and that's why it gets that average 10 out of 20 for me. It's like Troll 2, same thing. The Stuff, the same thing. A boy knows the stuff is alive. Yeah. Nobody believes him, and he tries to tell everybody.
A bunch of jerks, yeah.
And his family gets taken over and brainwashed, very similar to this movie. Yeah. Well, how
about the villain?
Well, let's move into villain then. It's hard to figure out exactly who you're rating. Is it his teacher? Is it his dad? Is it the big brain alien? And speaking of that big brain alien, if we can get a picture of him on screen.
Look how cute he is.
He looks a lot like Krang from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I do wonder if Eastman and Laird liked this movie and were maybe influenced a little bit in their design of Krang.
They're from our town.
That's right. They are from around here. So if you're stalking us, you just find out where the creators of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are from, and then you go from there. But I gave this villain, as a whole, all of these villains, including the weird drone Mr. Potato Head monsters, a 12.
I gave him a 10. Practical effects, the whole 9, and he was just adorable. And they made cute noises.
Yeah.
I definitely enjoyed it. I was not afraid at all of this monster. And that's, I think, a big thing about this movie is it feels very much like if Steven Spielberg made a horror movie for families, like fun for all ages, fun for the whole family. Like that's what this movie is.
I can see that. Actually, that's sort of similar to my thoughts on the next category, which is horror. You want to start with horror?
Yeah, not scary. Like
okay.
I was saying, not
Fair.
scary.
Yeah.
But it was a really neat sci-fi, I would say. Like I really liked the science aspects of it and trying to figure out like how he was gonna defeat the evil, basically. I was like, right. They're gonna use science in some way to like bring this thing down.
Yeah, are they gonna use germs? Is it gonna be bacteria? Is it gonna be bad music? No. They find a different way. These creatures love pennies, but it's not just pennies. They have a copper addiction.
Yeah. So they went to Copper Hill.
Yeah, makes sense. Mm-hmm. They must have scouted the earth out beforehand.
Yeah. Got a map, little guidebook with their binoculars and their maps.
So what did you score it?
I gave it a 9.
Okay, that's actually higher than me. I gave it an 8. And again, yeah, some of the monsters I think are kind of scary looking, but it's not a scary movie. And I've come to the conclusion this is a great horror movie for children. Like if you have kids and you are like, you know what, I want my kids to grow up liking horror movies, this is a good movie to have them watch when they're 7, 8, 9 years old. I think it's very appropriate for children. Just, there's monsters in it, and there's lots of people get killed, but they're like silly deaths gobbled up by monsters. What do you think?
I mean, or you could just do what my dad did and like make your child watch Invasion of the Body Snatchers and
not scary though.
Silence of the Lambs whenever you're very young, very young.
All right. Well, did we finish this category? Do you want to move on from here?
Yeah, go ahead with the effects.
All right. Well, let's move into the effects category. Fantastic. Right out the gate, I gave this a 16 out of 20 points. The monsters look fantastic. Stan Winston's, big brain monster, the drones, which by the way, I guess the drones, I did a little bit of research. There were tall guys with backpacks that held short guys, and they would put them inside these giant suits so that the person on their back would operate some of the puppetry while the person walking around would do other parts of the puppetry.
That's where Thunderdome got their idea.
The music, good, like I mentioned before, and the set design. Some of these sets are massive, insides of the alien ship, caverns, things like that. So I did give it a 16, and I feel really good about that. What'd you give it?
I give it 12. There's some really cool neck stuff in this movie, and they kept using it. I think it was very much like brain damage.
Okay.
Like, whenever he comes out of the mouth and like injects something in the back of it felt a lot like that. So I gave it a 12 because they kept using that. It was good.
All right. Well, we have one category left to score this this gem from the 80s on, and that is the S factor, where we can award points for whatever reason we want to, between 0 and 20. Would you like to take us into it, Vanessa?
Yes, I saved the best for last on this one because, how I am about cameos. Karen Black stars in this, and her son is actually the protagonist, and it makes for some wonderful chemistry between them. You could tell there's some genuine love between the two characters, even though she's his school nurse. But yeah, the kid was like just a pudgy, plain, like freckle-faced boy. It wasn't like Haley Joel Osment or anything, like not some famous child star. And Stephen King thinks that's the best way in a horror film to make things seem like they're going to go wrong, because Hollywood wouldn't kill, someone famous, someone that you like. And so to put this just very average, plain kid, you're like, oh no, like I know a kid that looks like that. So I gave it 10, all for Karen and her son.
Well, I gave it 9. We got lots of cool toy cameos from my childhood. There was a Mr. Potato Head, a Star Wars Rancor. We get a Godzilla.
And a Rector set.
Yeah, his bedroom full of all sorts of cool toys from the 80s. And the other thing that I gave this some points for was, as you mentioned, you like cameos. Well, the general, when the army shows up in this movie, that's right, the army just shows up, which I meant to mention it earlier. It sort of takes away from the horror once the army is there.
Yeah.
There's this kid's in distress and he gets the school nurse to in on what he's doing, but then all of a sudden the army is there and there's tanks, hundreds of guys with machine guns that are going after these aliens. So it sort of pulls back on the horror. But the general is from Return of the Living Dead, which is a classic that I love. And I was like, oh, that guy. It took me a little while. I saw him and was like, what's that guy from? Is it a commercial? Is that Marquis Salamone? And no, it was it's the guy from
Marquis Salamone. Well, whenever the military came in, it felt really a lot like Starship Troopers with like a lot less goo.
28 Days Later does something like this, where you get this horror movie and then he runs into like a military group.
Right.
And, but we're not going to tell you our totals just yet because we have Vanessa's one-sentence synopsis.
Karen Black proves once again that she can do no wrong by being the beloved school nurse that lets you leave class whenever you want.
All right. Well, my grand total is 55 horror score points for the 1986 classic Invaders from Mars. What'd you give it?
Give it a 49.
Okay.
It was cute, but I didn't have your same kind of nostalgic connection, so.
So averaging our scores together, that gives us a nice round 52 points, which is really close to IMDb's rating. It gives it a 5.6. Like if you move the decimal point, it's similar. Rotten Tomatoes gives it a 33%. I think that they were a little too hard on it. So that about wraps up this episode of Invaders from Mars. So give us 10 or 15 minutes and we might save you 2 hours.
And stay tuned for our next episode where you get to take a trip into my childhood. Stay spooky.